Today's conversation is with Guy Gilron. I met Guy when I was in the mining sector, and Guy is one of Canada's experts on selenium and the effects of coal mining on the environment. I think it'll be really interesting. He's a consultant, and I think you're going to really enjoy the conversation with Guy.
So we can start off. Very broad question. How did you get started in your career path?
I mean, it was pretty clear by sort of the late part of the high school, grade 12 and 13. But yeah, in my last 2 years of high school, I was fairly focused on, certainly focused on sciences, and then in particular biology and chemistry. And so when I went out to look at universities, um, the three universities I picked, I think at the time were Queen's, Guelph, and U of T. And I was actually, even though I'd got accepted to all three universities, I was gravitating towards Guelph. The Guelph program had a very large range. You could take fisheries, you could take marine, you could take wildlife. There were like within zoology, there were a number of different areas, and I was gravitating towards marine science, marine biology, and or just aquatic ecology. So in my first year, I think I was already in my specialized program, which was zoology. And then as I got into the second and third years of the undergrad, I was more and more interested in marine science. So got an unspecialized undergrad because I knew I was going to go to grad school. I did an unspecialized biology undergrad with a minor in chemistry and a minor in psychology. And then I took a year off after undergrad and I did something completely different. I was marketing a computer software program, so it was really nothing to do with my career, but I just needed a break from school. And and during that year, I was searching for a supervisor who was going to supervise my master's program, which also ended up being at the University of Guelph. So I studied under Dennis Lynn and John Ruff. Those two professors were working together on a number of projects related to plankton ecology. And so I did my master's in the energetics of plankton and how energy gets transferred from phytoplankton up to zooplankton up to fish. So I had a fairly good grounding in ecological interactions. So interactions between plants and primary producers, and then moving up moving up the food chain. And during my master's, got interested in addition to the biological concepts or ecological concepts of energy transfer, I was also becoming very interested, and at the time, there was a lot of focus on environmental protection, especially to do with water quality and water animals, water organisms, and how contaminants in those days, things like metals and hydrocarbons, how they were being transferred up the food chain. So part of my master's, even though my master's project was fairly fundamental biology, so I did some taxonomy, I did some ecological work. I also had a chapter of my thesis that was devoted to looking at eutrophication and the impact of let's call it pollution on upper trophic levels. So the career path sort of started with, I was fortunate enough to have my master's supervisor fund me for 6 months after I graduated to publish papers for my thesis, and I think I published 6 papers from my master's thesis. So during that 6 month period when I was publishing my papers for my thesis, I was also job hunting, and so the first thing I got was a research contract down in Burlington at the Canada Centre for Inland Waters, and was able to secure a 6 month contract doing research with a research scientist who also published quite a bit in the field. So it was an opportunity for me to get some street cred, in the area of research. But also the project had a lot to do with pollution in Lake Ontario and Hamilton Harbour. So I had a pretty good grounding in work in Hamilton Harbor. And during that 6 month period of contract, I also started looking for jobs and looking for long term jobs because I knew the contract was going to be finished within 6 months. So yeah, then I started my first job. I'm gonna say within 6 to 8 months of graduating from my master's, and got a consulting job, and so worked in consulting for the next probably 18 years after masters, different companies. I worked for a company in Ontario that also had an office in Vancouver, and worked in Vancouver for part of that time, and then also in Ontario. Then I worked back in Ontario for 14 years, where I worked for a number of different companies. And one of the things that characterized my work during that time was a kind of a good mix of field experience, lab experience, and desktop work. So, but very much in the realm of environmental monitoring, water quality testing, toxicity testing, ecological risk assessment. So during that time, just developing my skill set in those different areas. And I think that's what you're most interested in, is skill sets, because and so I would say what I did well, and what I think I succeeded in doing, was combining skills in different areas. So developing statistical skills, developing learning how to present and how to speak, to a scientific audience, learning to speak to a non-scientific audience, like communicating the science for the purposes of community engagement, etc., which right now is very important. I would say that that's one thing that I couldn't have predicted in those days, developing those skills, and how well those skills became transferred to my current where I am now, which is communication, a lot of science communication. So yeah, the career path was very much, and then like I said, 18 years in consulting, and then at the end of that period, I became engaged in many of projects to do with clients. And so one of my clients approached me and said, "Would you like to come and work for us and be our scientific person within the company?" So I ended up working for a mining company for 5 years, one mining company for 5 years, and then 3 years after that, working for another mining company, and then after that, I went out and started my own firm, and I've been working Borealis Environmental Consulting for the last 13 years.
Wow, that's very impressive. And you mentioned building these skill sets. Did you find you were able to build those through the different jobs you were working, or was there like extra readings or kind of courses you did along the way?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I would say, by and large, like predominantly working in you know on the job kind of skill development. But as you pointed out, some of the skills development was through short courses. So there were opportunities to take short courses either at conferences, or just taking courses with, you could take, like I did a course while I was working for industry called Zinc College. So it was a mining company that was part of an association that taught a course, and it was like a mini MBA. It was like taking an MBA in the middle of my career, learning about business, learning about communication, learning about negotiating contracts, negotiating with First Nations, negotiating with governments, etc., etc. So, yeah, some of the skills development was on the job, but some of it was also taking courses, and either short courses or other types of courses. And a lot of those skills development were things that I saw from that perspective. I think I had a vision because I didn't want to be standing in one place. I wanted to keep moving and keep learning, and then when you're young, you want your work to be more meaningful, and you want to be able to increase your impact. And so, starting out collecting data and developing data sets and understanding, statistics, etc., was interesting and exciting. But after a while, been there, done that, and you wanted to start seeing the impact of what does the science mean, and what's the significance of it, and how can I how can I help in society to take this science and apply it in some way? And when it comes to pollution and environmental protection, there's a great opportunity to take the science and move it forward and say what is this science telling us, and how can we problem solve better? So yeah, I think I had that thought, and I also had that kind of maybe itch to learn more and to progress more, like to learn more about my own skills, but learn also where those skills can come in handy, for others. And
You mentioned a lot about networking, which is a large part of our course now. For the reason we're doing these assignments, reaching out to different professionals. Do you have any
right.
recommendations for like building your network while working in the field?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I've alluded to some of them, but I think, well, first of all, it's always difficult to answer that question because I know there are different personality types, and I know that some people, let's face it, some people struggle. If they're shy, or they maybe don't feel like advertising themselves or promoting themselves. Then there's other people who promote themselves almost all the time, and it almost sounds everything sounds like a bit of a sales job. And so it's I think it's a happy medium between those things. You need to be promoting yourself. If you're going to be successful, you have to get out there and talk to people. You have to be confident of your skills, and and my philosophy has always been to not to analyze. I call it analysis paralysis. If you analyze every opportunity too much, you can overdo it. And I think it's really helpful to you see an opportunity, you go, I don't know, maybe this will generate some new contacts or new networks, but maybe it won't. I mean, sometimes you just have to take the risk. And I think if I could give some advice, I would say I would err on the side of taking risks when it comes to that, because you never know where a coffee date or a conversation or a lunch can turn into a project. And sometimes it's really being conspicuous by your absence. If you don't go somewhere and you don't participate in networking opportunities, you might just lose opportunities that you didn't know existed. So I would say, the biggest advice is just get out there, talk to people, and also not every conversation needs to be a marketing, event. It doesn't have to be, hey, I've got a company, I do this work, do you want to hire me? Instead, it can just be a conversation that is human interaction, and good good communication, good discussions, and that often leads to, hey, I've got this project, and I've got this problem, and my boss is really concerned about this, and we're thinking of doing this work. And then you say, well, actually, I have some experience in that area or something. In other words, it's more of lubrication. It's not really a sales job. One of the things I'm going to talk about is the fact that I don't know where I would be today if I hadn't reached out and hadn't become sort of more of like I was a promoter. I was promoting my work and promoting my company and my skills, but I couldn't have done that without the human connections. Yeah, but certainly, I mean, I can't deny that the success of my business was really about connecting face to face with people. Conferences was a big thing. I can't speak enough about conferences.
Do you find that coming from a non-directly environmental science background affected it at all, or do you found that it gave you more perspectives to look at it from?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Well, most of the marine science, I mean, some, like I said, my master's had a large part of it was like basic pure science. So taxonomy, like how animals are named and how they're categorized, how they function in ecosystems. It was mostly ecology. And like I would say that in order to understand environmental impacts or environmental assessment, you really do have to understand ecological concepts, even though it's not the same thing. You're right. A lot of what I do now is, although it's based in ecology, it's based on ecological interactions. I would say that you're right. It's quite a bit different. So, I think everyone who's in the environmental field who works in environmental protection or environmental engineering has a core science. So it might be physics, it might be chemistry, it might be evolutionary biology. Um, so you have a fundamental skill or a fundamental core expertise, and from that you develop the understanding of how the ecosystem and how environment works. And so that's where you have to jump off and be willing to learn about other disciplines. One of the themes that I wanted to talk about a little bit in this interview was the idea that um, in consulting and in the area of environmental protection, it's super important to form chains and form links with other disciplines. So right now, for example, I work with a lot of geologists. I work with engineers. I work with geographers. I work with chemists. I work with people who have core expertise in other areas, not just other areas of biology, but also other areas completely, like forestry, geology, all of those things. So I would say that just getting back to your question, I think the master's program or the master's degree, or the research that you do post graduate, like post undergrad, is really just the beginning, and you're sort of growing and developing understandings of multidisciplines, multiple disciplines across. And environmental science is extremely multidisciplinary and really important to interlink with others and other areas. And that's one of the exciting things I've had in my career, is the ability and the privilege to work with others, because every new project that has different aspects to it is an opportunity to learn a new science.
And how do you see the future of this career path going? If you have any insight, like in the consulting industry, and how you think it's going to grow in the future?
It can go. It's. I'd almost call it recession proof. If anything, we have a society that's becoming more, because of the internet and because of the education system and because of the amount of information that's out there. I think we have a population and a society that's more knowledgeable and more focused on. Like, everyone's got an opinion about climate change. Everyone's got an opinion about microplastics in the environment. Coral reefs. What's happening with coral reefs? Are they dying? What's that going to do for our food system? How can we ensure that our food is safe? Do we have contaminants in our food? And this information is being transmitted through the media. It's being transmitted through university courses. And so, if anything, we have more and more focus on environmental sustainability, environmental issues. And I think it's safe to say that it's not going away. And the need for understanding it and the need for tackling those challenges and those problems, from a societal perspective, but also from an environmental perspective, like us protecting the planet and making sure that we are safely drinking water, safely eating food, and also just enjoying nature. Being able to spend time in nature, that's like feeding your soul, just the way you're feeding your body with good, clean food. So, yeah, I don't have any problem. I don't have any issues with. In fact, I think what I've seen recently in articles I've read is that there's actually going to be a shortage of people in the environmental field, not a overflow of too many people, being educated in environmental science and not getting jobs. I think the career path is pretty strong, I would say. But and really, what will define the people who are successful in it and the people who are not is the willingness to learn. As I pointed out, the willingness to learn new things, the willingness to take chances, and the interest in learning from other disciplines. Those key areas are the where the success is going to be for those who are keen to. I mean, unless you have a job where you work in a lab and analyze samples, which, I mean, there's lots of that, but it's not as exciting as, say, what I was doing, because I did do some lab work. I mean, I did lab work and I did field work, and I did manage projects along the way, and then just developed those skills, and then became more and more knowledgeable and better able to tackle the bigger problems.
And then I just wanted to ask kind of a big ending question for how what would you tell your like 22-year-old self now about this career space after all your experience, and just
Well,
kind of leave room for you to say anything else you were hoping to share.
actually, I love those questions because I'm trying to think about, like, I don't always, when people ask me what would you say to your younger self, a lot of the things I would say are you've taken the right you've made the right choices in terms of your attitude about it. Like, I think in the days that I was, even before I started my masters, and people would ask me like, what are you going to do a master's degree in? Do you think you're going to get a job? Because there was a big joke in those days. You wouldn't know this, but there was a big poster, and it was at Guelph. I remember it was at Guelph. It was this huge poster in the university center, and it was basically a photograph of a guy, a cab driver, and he had like a little cap on, and he had the taxi, where they show the how many minutes and how many dollars, and they show him from the back seat, and he'd be, his hand would be out, and he'd go, and the sort of the meme or the thing would say, George has a degree in marine biology, and he's got a job driving a cab. So the big joke was, marine biology. What are you going to do with that? I mean, are you going to get a job? So I think what I'd say to my 22-year-old self, I guess, is go for it, because if you have the right attitude and you're always interested in learning, and you're determined to get something in this career, like do something with it. If you've got the determination and confidence, just go for it. And the other thing I would say to myself, which I think I probably took that advice anyways, is just say yes to things. When, like I said earlier about going to conferences and networking, you really never know where your success is going to come from. There's all these forks in the road where you could go one way or the other, and oftentimes, if you're willing to take risks, and I'm not saying you should always take risks, because sometimes that's stupid, but it's good to take risks in your career, just to learn, first of all, to learn more about yourself and how confident you can be in taking those risks. And the other thing is that you can really learn new things from every experience. And so I don't know if there's anything else I would say to my 22-year-old self other than take more statistics courses, which used to scare the crap out of me, because I'm not a numbers guy. I'm not a statistics guy, but I think understanding statistics, and not just statistics but numerical skills like spreadsheets and modeling, and those are big, and those are important. Not just doing them, but also understanding them. Understanding how numerical skills can feed into environmental work, and so I would probably have taken more stats. I did take a graduate stats course, which was hard enough. I don't know if you guys are still have to take those courses, but it was a scary one for most of us biology types, right? Because we were all kind of like more like in nature, going for hikes and bird watching and things like that. Not really computer people sitting around with numbers and things. So yeah, but I mean, the other thing I would say to anybody who's 22 is get out there and promote yourself. Again, not in a cocky way, but just in a way of like, don't be afraid to tell people about yourself, and to show them that you're confident. I mean, oftentimes they say that when you go for job interviews, one of the biggest challenges for employers is that they have a hard time hiring somebody who doesn't look like they're confident in themselves. Like, that they're almost apologizing for how little they know, and I don't really have experience in this area. And I'm not saying you should ever lie about your experience, but you should definitely make the most of what you've done and really promote it. Like, say, I'm really interested in this area, I'm enthusiastic about it, I'd like to learn more. Instead of saying I don't have experience, you can just say I'm really interested in this, and I want to take courses. I want to learn. I think it's the way you spin it. So confidence. I think confidence helped me in a lot of my job interviews. Just not seeming so shy and timid that they couldn't get a sense of whether I could accomplish anything. So confidence really, expressing that confidence to people really helps give them confidence in you. So diversify, say yes to things. Um, don't be afraid to take courses and learn and network with people. I think no matter what you're in, whether you're in consulting or whether you're in government or in industry or in any area of life, I think it's important to build networks and listen to people. Listen to what their needs are and listen to what they're interested in.
That's
Sure.
amazing to hear. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us. And I know all our classmates will love to hear this information.